Ready? All right, I would like to call the meeting to order for the Nisswa Planning Commission Board of Adjustment for Tuesday, November 1st, 2022, 5:15. Can I have a roll call, please?
Gary Harris.
Josh Young.
John.
John.
Dave Reese.
Maggie Wentler.
Bethany Soderlund.
We will now proceed to on-site visits and reconvene at 6 p.m. I would like to reconvene and call the meeting to order for the Nisswa Planning Commission Board of Adjustment for Tuesday, November 1st, 2002. Roll call, please.
Gary Harris.
Josh Young,
Dave Reese.
Maggie Wentler.
Bethany Soderland.
are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So move.
A second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Next, to approve the meeting minutes for October 4th, 2022. Are there any corrections or additions to those minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So move.
Second, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Next item is an open forum. Is there anyone present tonight that would like to speak towards something not on the agenda this evening? Okay. Moving on to public hearings, I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So move.
I'll second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Alrighty. First item is variance application 028-22 for the scrape and rebuild construction with the expansion of a non-conforming dwelling in a bluff and bluff impact zone with a 13-foot side yard setbacks within the shoreline residential zoning district. The subject property is located at 22925 Old Government Trail, PID 282-60525 on Gull Lake. Owner applicant Nathan and Brooke Funk. Like to take a seat, state your name.
Nathan Funk.
Bethany, your staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning Commission. On June 13th, 2022, the Planning Commission approved a variance for the construction of a two-story addition attached to an existing legal non-conforming dwelling with side yard setbacks of 12 feet where 15 feet is required. The property owners have since changed their plans and are now seeking a variance to allow for a two-story scrape and rebuild of an existing legal non-conforming single-story dwelling and deck within a bluff and the bluff impact zone with side yard setbacks of 12 feet where 15 is required. The applicant is also requesting a variance from OHW for the proposed deck. 60 feet where 75 feet is required. Recommended conditions include an erosion protection plan, a stormwater management plan, and due to the close proximity of the construction to the parcel to the northwest, a plan to include vegetation standards and screening between the parcels.
If you would like to make a public comment regarding this project, please step towards the podium and state your name and address. Hearing none, I'll close public comments. Questions? Gary.
I have none at this point. We've been out on the site before, so with a tree laying on it. And understand what the project is all about and looks like you're doing the right thing.
I have no questions. John? David?
Staff has covered our comments.
If there's no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I move that variance application 028-22. I was looking at 22-925 Old Government Trail. Be approved according. We approved the variance.
We approved a
That stops
variance.
here, right? The variance and conditional use permit, so.
The first one here tonight is the variance. And so this variance request is for an OHW setback of 60 where 75 is required for the
Right.
deck. 12 where 15 is required for the side yard setbacks, and then for construction and dirt moving within the bluff and impact zone.
Yeah, I'll have to do another one for the conditional use.
The next application
Yes.
is for.
But I move approval of the variance application 028-22. According to the findings of fact and the condition that's in the staff report, sorry. I'll wake up before the meeting's over.
Discussion, none. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Next item is a
Just like
conditional.
that.
Next item is a conditional use permit application 029-22 to allow for the construction of a 6,318 square foot dwelling within the Shoreline Residential Zoning District. The subject property is located at 22925 Old Government Trail, PID 282-60525 on Gull Lake. Owner applicant Nathan and Brooke Funk. You're already here. Bethany, your staff report.
Yes, the applicant is requesting the CUP for a 6,318 square foot dwelling within the Shoreland District. Section 2151 of the Nisswa Code of Ordinances states that the residential dwellings exceeding 4,500 square feet, including attached storage areas on less than 2.5 acres, require a conditional use permit where reasonable conditions may be placed. Recommended conditions for the CUP include the installation of a water meter, stormwater management plan, and a vegetation screening plan.
If you would like to make public comment regarding this project, please step towards the podium and state your name and address. Hearing none, I'll close public comment.
No questions.
No questions. David,
No further.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move conditional or approval of the conditional use permit application 029-22. 22925 Old Government Trail. I'll be according to the findings of fact in the staff report and the conditions of approval.
Second by John. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries. Good luck with the project.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Is it bad to say, I hope I don't have to come back here?
Yes, that's fine.
There's a seal. Thank you.
Good night.
Next item is a conditional use permit application 030-22 to allow for the construction of a 8,341 square foot dwelling meeting all setbacks within the Shoreline Residential Zoning District. The subject property is located at Nisswa Circle, PID 28110522 on Nisswa Lake. Owner applicant Ron Ames. State your name for the record.
Yes.
Just your name.
Oh, Ronald Ames.
Thank you.
Yep.
Bethany, your staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is requesting a CUP for the construction of an 8,341 square foot home, meeting all setbacks and requirements as shown on the certificate of survey, located on Nisswa Circle on Nisswa Lake. Recommendations, conditions for this application include the installation of a water meter, tracer wires, and a step station as recommended by the Public Works Director, and a stormwater management plan.
If you would like to make public comment regarding this project, please step towards the podium and state your name and address. Hearing none, I'll close public comments. Gary.
No, I don't have any questions at this point. I thought we had a thorough visit at the site and got a pretty good feel for what's going on. I don't, you're aware of the fact that you're gonna have to have a stormwater management plan and some things like that. That's one of the conditions, so.
I think the only question that I had was kind of addressed when I was there. I asked about the elevation with regards to the stormwater plan. Since we already have construction going on next door, I don't know if there has to be some sort of coordination between those two because they both had stormwater plans. So just so we're not fighting each other and we're not pushing the water the wrong way.
Site, I'm gonna tie into the existing neighbors.
Yeah.
Erosion control with our silt fence and wrap it around.
Okay.
On the hillside of the wetland.
And then staff will make sure that stormwater management plans don't direct stormwater to
Yep.
the neighboring parcels.
John, do you have any questions? David?
Did we mention the culvert for the driveway? Was that part of Tom's report?
The culvert, yes.
Yep, okay. Just wanted to make sure that was in there. That's all.
Culvert will be addressed with the regular land use permit and the driveway that will go in at the time. Yeah, I believe it right now. It's just a construction access that you'll be putting in.
Pardon?
You'll be putting in a construction access right now, and then the
Yep.
driveway will be going in the spring.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
all right.
Any additional comments?
On none.
I'll entertain a motion.
I move that planning and zoning approve the conditional use permit application 030-22 to allow for construction of a 8,341 square foot dwelling. All according to the findings of fact that's submitted by the staff and the staff recommendations, the three that are shown on the staff report.
Got all that? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed, motion carries.
Thank you. Mrs. Ames will appreciate it. Get her 8 grandkids up here. Thank you.
I'll entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Next item under new business is final plat application 031-22 to replat Roy Ridge with adjustments to the existing 7 lots within the Shoreland Residential Zoning District. No new parcels are being created and no building or development is being proposed. Subject property is located at Highland Avenue, PID 281-00543, 281-00544, 281-00545, 281-00546, 281-00547, 281-00548, 281-00549, 281-00550, 281-00552, 281-00553. Applicant owner Roy Ridge Homeowners Association. Owner applicant.
Hello.
Hello.
Patrick Trotter, still Mark Lance Ray.
Bethany.
Thank you, Chair. I've got nothing further to add than what you said, other than I was able to verify with the city attorney that any necessary changes to the declarations and any required deed restrictions can take place prior to the final approval by the city council, and that those items should be no reason to delay the requested planning commission recommendation.
What kind of motion? Is it just a motion to approve?
To approve.
Recommendation.
Recommend approval, right? Okay. I move that the planning zoning recommend approval, recommend to the council for approval of a final plat for Dry Ridge
First edition.
replat, second edition,
First edition.
first edition. Okay. And according to the findings of fact by the staff and the conditions also listed in the staff report, of which there's 8.
I'll second. All those approve.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed. Motion carries. Thank you. Next item is the 2023 Planning Commission meeting date schedule.
Yes, thank you. I have a list of proposed dates that is in your packet. With that. I apologize. All right, here's the meeting dates. I've made just a few changes to the planning commission dates. I have, for just consistency's purposes, I've changed the application deadline to the first Friday of each month for the following month's planning commission meeting. This year we've had deadlines which were the same as of today. The deadline for the December meeting is today. Same day as our planning commission meeting. I just felt that having the deadlines on Tuesdays could be simplified by splitting those days up. I also moved the planning commission meeting for July to the second Tuesday of July, but I did not change anything else. So the deadline is still the same deadline as if we would be holding the meeting on the 4th. And then when we have to deem it complete or incomplete for the same. I've shortened that timeline to 1 week. I feel that that is an adequate time to review if all the required materials have been submitted. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
No, I think the only thing that we moved in the past was that July date, so it didn't mess with the 4th of July, so should be fine. No. Looks good to me.
So, yep, so I'm just looking for recommendation for approval to the city council.
Recommend the submitted 2023 Planning Commission meeting dates approval.
John seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Old business shoreland ordinance revision.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm all right. Just give you a little heads up. I ended up having to have a little bit of surgery on my nose on Friday, so if I talking like that's just the way it's gonna be, and it's hard for me to breathe and to talk. I got some, I'm having a hard time speaking, so we'll see if we can get through this and we'll go forward, so.
Okay.
So what I sent to Bethany last week was version 1.0 of the shore ordinance. And this is probably the most least exciting part of the ordinance because it's all the administrative part of it. You're dealing with the provisions of the ordinance for administration and zoning provisions and all that kind of stuff. And so, like I said, it's nothing super exciting, but it's one of the things that you really have to have because you don't want to, a lot of times when you're dealing with zoning and stuff, you don't always lose on the facts of the case, but on the actual procedure. So we got to make sure we have all of these ducks in a row. I did reorganize it just a little bit because I felt like it was some easier ways to make it flow a little more intuitive. And so, if you guys want me to go through each section, I can, but I think it was pretty clear as to what's going on in here. I don't know if anybody had a chance, if you guys had any questions or if there's something that jumped out as you weren't sure what the purpose was or why it was written in such a way. I'd be happy to answer them, or I could, Mr. Chair, I don't know if you did want me to go through it or.
No, I don't think that's necessary. It seems clear that you just cleaned up some of the redundancy from what I've gathered from going back and forth, so.
I also submitted it to the DNR and have got their feedback and minimal feedback from them. The one bit that they thought was important was on the first page, the repeal of existing ordinances. They thought that should be removed from the ordinance and actually just put into when the council goes to approve the ordinance, that language would be in the resolution saying that this ordinance now repeals previous ordinances, they felt that that would be a better location. And I don't have any issues with that. I think you can do it either way if you want to, but I don't think it really matters. The other question they had was on page, or on section 2011 conflicting regulations. So there are times where there's a lake classification will overlap. So you might be with a natural environment lake here and a general development lake here, and they overlap. And so I will add some language in 20-11 that will clarify which provisions of the ordinance will apply. Would it be a natural environment lake, or would it be GD or RD, however it's set? And in essence, what it means, what you do is it's not, it's pretty simple. You basically look at the number of percent property in each of the districts, and you have to figure out which way the water would flow. And whichever way the water flows is typically what lake class you're going to choose. And that comes from the DNR. And then, let's see if they had, and they did have, they want some clarification on 20-10 F. So right there, it says that the planting and harvesting of farm crops and trees shall not be considered a land use subject to the provisions of this ordinance. Well, there are a few things that the agricultural side does have a few regulations that we're gonna have to pinpoint and label, and I'll put that back in the performance standards, the ordinance for next month. But in essence, it means you gotta have a 50-foot buffer. So you can't, if you've got pasture with cattle, they have to be at least 50 feet away from the public water, and same for like a row crop. Wouldn't apply to planting trees. And so it'll be very clear that you can plant trees basically, as close to the water as you want. That's a positive for that. But
So you're saying that language would be added to that?
yeah, I'll add language back, and then what I'll do is I'll reference this. So what the language will say is, it doesn't apply except for provision of the ordinance.
Okay.
And so it's going to be very minimal as far as what we're going to say is actual regulated by that. It won't be very much. It'll just be that 50-foot setback. Unless you guys want it more. I mean, you could have it more if you want it. So that would be, up to you guys. And then when you look in the ordinance too, you'll see some areas like this where it's just, I got little highlights. And that's just to remind me that when the ordinance is all put together, I got to tie it all back together. I don't know what provision I'm referring to yet until I put the provision in place. So those are just placeholders for me to know so I know to put that ordinance or to refer to the right spot of the ordinance. One question that I had, and this is something that comes right in front of out of 462, is that your zoning map is supposed to be recorded at the county recorder. I talked with Bethany about that, and I don't know if you.
I was
Know anything
able
about that,
to
or-
verify with Nicole Stotts at the county that
Okay.
they do not have anything on record
Okay,
that she could find.
so that's
That is
so
something that we would need to do.
we'll have to figure out the format that they want that in to send that to them. As far as the language for variances and conditional use permits, you already have that section in another, all the details for that. So I just put the very basic here, and then to be able to then refer back to the statute and that part of the ordinance, because whenever you change a statute, it means you're stuck changing an ordinance. So if you can refer to the statute instead of and put the language in yourself, you avoid a lot of revisions, because anytime they change the rule or change the statute and you got it verbiage in the ordinance, and you have to go in and basically update the ordinance. And so it gets to be kind of a hassle. So I was able to do that on a few things. When I looked at section under 20-33, there was a provision in there, and I wanted to get your take on what you wanted as far as mitigation. So what this says is that in evaluating all plats, variances, conditional uses, land use permits, shoreline alteration permits, the department, now the next word is really important. It's on 20-33. It says the department may require the property owner to address the following conditions: stormwater, reduced impervious, all that, those 7 items. So the question is, do you want it to be shall, or do you want it to be may? May gives your staff the flexibility to look at that list and determine what is appropriate for the site. Because if you say shall, then the landowner has to do every single one of those. And sometimes they're wasting money on a provision that just is not applicable to what they're trying to accomplish. And so I think using the term may give you that flexibility and allow staff to be able to make those decisions without being so rigid and that. So that's my recommendation. That's why I put it in there with a may like that. So that's why I recommend it.
Bethany, what are your thoughts?
Right. Shall is important. There are times when shall is very important. Yep, absolutely.
We have thresholds for stormwater. That's going to supersede. If we have threshold, I mean, anytime the restoration well, that would happen after enforcement or after.
Correct. Yep.
So there are some safety that the shallow will happen in certain
Yep.
circumstances regardless. So I think in this instance, having a
And may doesn't mean, I mean, may mean that she could require all seven if she felt that would be appropriate. So
It seems like it give more flexibility either way,
Yep.
so.
it helps you tailor it to working with the landowners, because I think sometimes government can kind of get a bad rap when we choose this one size fits all mentality, and people get really frustrated sometimes as to why this doesn't even apply to me. Well, the ordinance says I have to do it. So we want to try to avoid those as much as possible. Again, I put some language in. I got the nonconformity section written in here. Again, it's just a couple points because I refer back to the statute. The statute has all the language we need to know about nonconformities. We'll just refer back to that. And that will mean you won't have to change that language again down the road. And a question I had for you too is that when you look at Minnesota Rule 6120, it requires that an LGU would notify the DNR at least 10 days prior to a public hearing for a variance, a condition or ordinance amendment in that. I would really think it would be nice to change that to 30 days, not for the variances, not for the CUPs, but for the ordinance revision part, that you're going to give the DNR more time to look at that versus 10 days. Because what I've found is that when you give the DNR that short of a window, they don't come back with very positive information because they really haven't had a chance to look at it. Because once they get it up here, it's got to funnel down to St. Paul. That's got to funnel back up. They've got a very specific process for doing that. It just 10 days isn't enough. And what they'll do is they'll come to your next meeting and say, table the request because we haven't had a chance to look at it. And the rule says that the DNR has to sign off on your ordinance to make sure that it meets some of the requirements. The DNR has to approve any ordinance, any shoreline ordinance, the DNR has to sign off on that. So I don't see any harm in it, and it's a goodwill gesture towards the DNR. And so I think it's, that's what, when I was with the county, that's what we used to do, is give them plenty of time. And we got a lot better feedback and it was a much smoother process. So that would be my recommendation, but we can always stick with the 10 days. It's your call.
How often do you get a lot of feedback? I mean, we've done a lot of projects and they almost never say anything.
The only time they would ever give you feedback on an ordinance revision is if you were so far out, I feel like you just completely missed it, so yeah, they're basically looking for minimum compliance with the rule, and you guys are gonna meet and exceed that. So, I don't ever see an issue with the DNR ever coming back to say, but at the end of the day, you do have to get a letter from them that does certify that it meets the minimum standards of the rule.
And I have no problem with the 30 days. An ordinance amendment or a change like that isn't going to be a surprise. Like we'll know about that. It's not going to be, we just heard about it. Now we got to quick do turnarounds.
So that's that part of the ordinance. Does anybody have any questions about any of those provisions or any thoughts about those?
I would like to note the date of the
Yes.
ordinance of July 17th, 1970. Our ordinance right now does not have a date. And that date is really important. I've forgotten the term, but
Yeah,
it's the date of,
it's the ordinance upon
it's
which you
of
enacted
control.
your first ordinance.
Yep.
It was that date I've been told is July 17th, 1970. And so that matters for your nonconformities. Because you can do things that were done prior to there being zoning in place, then there's certain things you can do, but if there was zoning in place, there are different restrictions on that. So that date is really important. And so if you don't have that date, then it causes, it's very difficult to enforce nonconformities.
Give me an example, Bethany.
for example, if somebody had a structure that was built prior to 1970 and it was a legal existing non-conforming structure, they would be able to rebuild that as long as the use had been maintained. But after that, they'd be required to conform to the ordinance provisions as they are today.
Or a situation might be where somebody built a deck in 1984 and it doesn't meet setbacks. So now they're coming in for a permit. It's been 5 landowners and they just assumed that the deck was right. Well, that deck doesn't meet setbacks. So we got to either get a variance or minimize the size so it becomes compliant. And so that's why that date's really important, because it's so hard to go out to a site. You can use aerial photography and try to look at what was there and try to figure that out. It's really challenging. But with that date, it's pretty clear. You can go back in the record. You
Yep.
can say there was no permit for a deck. There's no permit in our records for a deck. And it's not conforming. And so now you have to either get a variance to keep it, or we have to bring it back to the size that would meet setbacks.
Yeah, and almost every ordinance I've seen has a date of official control is I think what
Yeah,
it's called.
That's exactly what it is.
And
Yep.
so we haven't had one. So it just says nonconformities that existed prior to the date of the adoption of this ordinance. It was just kind of hanging out there.
Yeah,
So
you can get
this, Jenny and I did some research to come up with this date. This isn't what just decided upon. This is the date that the ordinance, as we understand it, was adopted. And so it's really critical that we have that in this version. Any other questions? Also 2017. Chris? 2017 shoreland alteration permits, that's a
Yep.
big change.
Yep, I just added a little bit of language to that in number 20-17 to clarify what activities are going to require a shoreline alteration permit. So I think it covers those, and you've also got, the verbiage of structure such as, but not limited to. So if there's something that pops up that would fit that, that doesn't fit that list, but would make sense to be in that within that area, then the shoreline alteration permit would apply.
And
That
does
is gonna
anybody have
really
questions
clarify.
about shoreland alteration permits?
So that's gonna be for activities in the shoreline area. So that's gonna be like if somebody wants to come and do a grading filling, if they want to build a water oriented accessory structure, if they want to build a patio, a boardwalk, ice ridge alteration, all those types of activities that are near shore type activities, that permit would cover that. So you'd have a land use permit, and that's for structures. That's for building houses and garages and decks and patio or gazebos and all sorts of fun stuff. But the shoreline alteration permit is meant to talk about specific alterations in the shoreline area, part of the city. It makes it easier, I think, for folks to understand what permit is required for certain situations, so. The next thing I did as part of this is I went and I looked through the comp plan, because we want to make sure that what we're doing makes sense with the comp plan. And so there's a section in the plan titled Natural Resources, and it gives a good overview, I think, of, kind of what the expectations are and, kind of what we're looking to do going forward. And so there's some action items that I found that were on page 19 and 20. And I'll just tell you kind of what some of those were and which ones, when you do a comprehensive plan, you throw a lot of ideas out, but not everyone is always going to be able to be implemented at the same time as others. And so I identified the ones that I thought were really made sense for this time that we're working with the ordinance. Number one is to evaluate the DNR alternative shoreline standards and see if any of those standards would make sense in the ordinance. And we'll talk about the second. The comp plan wants to establish shoreline preservation standards to limit the clearing of vegetation. We're going to cover that. We're going to regulate the use of riprap, if that's what you guys want to do. That was something in the comp plan that's important. Another action is to establish stormwater systems within both commercial and residential development. And then require compliance inspections for all septic systems. So that'll be required upon a permit. And then to work with landowners on cases where you've got maybe some degradation of the shoreline to help them establish a natural vegetative buffer. So those are the kind of the provisions that I pulled out of the comp plan that I felt really applied to this section of the ordinance. And so I don't know if you guys got, did they get this? Did you get a
No.
copy of that?
No,
You didn't get
I
that?
haven't seen that.
Oh,
Oh, this Minnesota rules, this one.
yep,
I
that one.
have not given it out for your instructions.
Let's give it out.
Okay.
I didn't want to pass this out because I didn't want you guys to start reading stuff and then it's easy to get distracted. I know how it is, so. So what I've got before you now are really the key components of the ordinance for next month. And so what I want to do tonight was just talk a little bit about some ideas, give you a little guidance as to where you want to go and, kind of where your thoughts are. So what you've got on the first page is a summary of the top block is the current minimum standards. We got to meet those 6120 non-negotiable. The second block are the alternative standards, and that was developed in 2005. So those are standards that are not required, but a lot of areas have chose to use some of those. And then the current ordinance was what's at the bottom. So it kind of gives you an idea of what lot size is. And really what this talks about is lot size lot width, buildable area, and the setbacks. So if you see like on the top where you see lot size RIP, that's riparian. And riparian means right on the water. Those are the ones that have the waterfront. And RIP is non-riparian, so those are all the ones that are off the water. So currently, the way that the ordinance you have the 6120 allows you to have lot sizes based on sewered versus non-sewered. So sewered means that you're connected to the city municipal wastewater system. Non-sewered means you've got a septic system on the lot. And so the way the rules were written back in 1989 was that you could actually have a smaller lot size if you were on the city sewer because you didn't have to put a septic system, right? Well, the alternative standards kind of, so then let's just go down to if you're non-sewered, then you're looking at a 20,000 square foot lot. You know, half an acre for a riparian. If it was non-riparian, it was 40,000 square feet. When I looked at your requirements in the ordinance, you didn't have any non-riparian standards. So right off the bat, we're kind of out of sync with what the minimum rules of 6120 say, because you only have requirements for riparian lots, and that would then have to then translate to the rest of the shoreline area because there's no standards for the non-riparian. And so we're going to have to fix that non-riparian section of the ordinance. And so then you look at, as you go over, you can see, so what are the lot width requirements? So if you're a general development lake that's sewered, your lot width is only 75 feet. If it's non-sewered, then it's either 100 feet or 150 feet, 100 feet for riparian, 150 feet for the non-riparian. And so the further, they allow us more lots closer to the lake, and then once you get back off the lake, the lots tend to increase in size. And so, but anyway, so I guess if you go to the alternative standards, what they recommend is no differentiation between sewered versus non-sewered. We're just going to look at a general lot size, and the recommendation from that for a GD lake was 30,000 square feet on the riparian lot, 40,000 for the non-riparian, with a lot width of being 120 feet and 150 feet. Right now, your lot width is 75, 100, or 150. And so the big change with that is really going from 75 and 100 up to 120. And then you can just see as you go down, you can see the other lot widths, and the setbacks don't change. All that is still consistent with what you have today. So there's no real change proposed on the setbacks, but just curious what your thoughts are about the sewered versus the unsewered, if you think that you still want to continue a differentiation between the two, or if you think it makes sense to go to just one general lot size regardless of sewered versus non-sewered. And the reason that I think it's important to think about it is because having a lot being sewered versus unsewered is one component of development, but it's also another component is impervious coverage. And so the larger the lot size, the lower your impervious coverage. And I think it's going to be overall better for the water quality. When you have a 15,000 square foot lot, and then I hear those houses being built today, they're already blowing over that at 50%. They would be at 50% impervious based on the numbers that I saw tonight. And so my recommendation, we can go to the second page, would be to adopt some of the parts of the alternative standards, but keep the oh, I should have put that there. I guess I'll explain it. So I recommend for a GD lake that the lot size be 30,000. This is for new lots. This is not applying to existing lots. These are existing lots of record. They can still be built on. They won't need a variance if they can meet setbacks. This is just for new development, for new plats, new subdivision of lots. Your riparian lots will be 30,000. Your non-riparian will be 40,000. What this puts into place, which I think is really important, that I think we need to consider, is buildable area. Because you can develop a lot, and then you come in to build on it. There's nowhere to build because there's wetland on it. It's sized in a way that you can't meet the setbacks properly. And so you want to make sure that there is 14,400 square feet of buildable area on that lot that meets setbacks, is not encroaching into any adjacent wetlands, is not encroaching into any of the neighbors' setbacks. That's what that buildable area is so important for. An RD lake, and I did make a mistake on the lot width. I recommend you stay with your 100 feet. I don't think we need to go to 120 feet. I think 100 feet is still very reasonable. What it means is, instead of a 20,000 square foot lot, at 100 feet, you're just going back a little bit deeper with that 30,000 square feet to provide a little bit more buildable area and room on that lot, so it's not so tight and so small. That's basically the difference between the two. And then everything else kind of follows the same way. You see you've got your buildable area, Your lot width, pretty much everything stays the same. For your RD lakes, for your any lakes, that all stays the same. And what this does is it makes it simple. You don't have to, figure out, well, when I bought the lot, I had a septic system, and now it's got the city sewer on it. So what does that mean? Do we want to split that lot in half and get 2 lots out of it? I think having this provision will be good for density on the lake because there's fewer lots left to develop. And I think it'll provide plenty of room for people to develop and be able to treat their stormwater runoff, have ample shoreline vegetation, still maintain the property. So that's the direction I would recommend we go, but that's up to you guys. What do you think? I'll write down whatever number you want. Just tell me what you want.
I like the idea that sewered lots can be a little bit smaller.
Okay,
I grew up in that neighborhood, the
Yep.
Twin Cities, and development,
sure.
everything that we did. That was always one of the rules.
Yep.
You had sewer, you could have smaller lots. If you
Okay.
were Non-sewer, you had to have larger lots, simple as
yeah.
that. That was more to take care of septic areas,
Right,
than
exactly.
drain fields than it was for anything else, but.
Yep.
I think I prefer that. I like that idea.
Okay.
Personally, so.
So we want to keep the Seward and the unsewered.
Well, that's
Keep
just
those,
my
yeah,
opinion.
no, I see
You know?
some nodding of heads up there too a little bit. So I mean, so then the question is, okay, that's good. We can do that. So what do you want them to be? Because, the minimum standards for that would be, for a GD lake would be 15,000 square feet for a sewered parcel and 20,000 square feet for an unsewered parcel. And then it would be 75 feet wide for a sewered lot on a GD lake and 100 feet or 150 feet on a non-sewered lot. Do you like those numbers, or do you think going from 20,000 to 30,000 on an area where they're gonna have a septic system would make sense to increase that lot size? Or are you happy with 20,000 square feet?
What do you think, Dave?
Oh, I was thinking about what you said, Gary, and I agree with that from the standpoint of the off-lake lots having the ability to have some higher density when sewered.
Right.
It's when you get to the lakeshore lots that you have a lot more moving parts with impervious coverage, the stormwater runoff, that's where we end up looking for some real concerns with neighbors and runoff and steep slopes and buildable area and that sort of thing. It seems, I would say, just speaking generally.
Right.
So when you go down to 20,000 square feet on a lake lot, I think you're really squeezing a lot into a small sack.
Yep.
To try to handle all those issues. And it makes me wonder about whether or not that's going in the direction that your comp plan guided the city.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And for a GD, for a general development lake, for the non-riparian lots, that would be 10,000 square feet. According to the minimum standards by the rule 6120. Now remember, that was written in 1989. We're building bigger houses now, I think, than we did back then consistently. I mean, you can go to Lake Minnetonka and you can see all the big houses, but you're seeing more, you're seeing larger houses being built now. And so, 10,000 square foot lot, how many 10,000 square foot houses have you been building, have got permits? A few, that wouldn't even fit on a lot like that. Not saying that they couldn't buy multiple lots to make it work, I mean, that's always an option. But I would agree with Dave. I think, I think you would like, I think we want to have larger riparian lots. And then we can go off that and have smaller offshore lots if they're sewered. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think I was leaning more towards offshore lots.
Yeah, okay.
Not lakeshore lots.
Yeah.
'Cause you get off the, and I think you're right about the lakeshore properties. But
How big do
get-
you want that lakeshore lot to be? 30,000 square feet or?
Yeah, I think 30,000 would be a good number, but it's,
30? I think it's a good number myself. Yep. I would agree with
but I
that.
think we get off the lake, we get back into, like this afternoon or this evening when we were over on Old Government Trail. When you get the big outlot on to the east over there, I mean, the property should be handled entirely different than what the lake shore is. It's my feel, but
Well, then you jump to your recreational development lakes, where if it's sewered, you can do a 20,000 square foot lot and a 15,000. Or when it's non-sewered, then it's 40,000, regardless if it's in the, if it's non-sewered, it's 40,000, 40,000. So, the question be for your recreational development lakes. Is 20,000 square feet the right number for a riparian lot, and is 15,000 the right number for, you, we don't get to go less than those. We decide if, is that small, that, do we want to go bigger than that? If we think 20 and 15 works, then that's what we'll put in the ordinance. And we don't have to decide tonight. I can put something on paper. We can chat about it next month. I'm not looking to you guys to make every decision tonight. I'm just looking more for direction, because I really wanted to see the sewer to unsewered. How important was that? And is that something the community wants? I've heard that loud and clear. So we'll make sure we have sewered and unsewered provisions. And I'll put some numbers in, and then, I'll bring it back next month, and I'll bring my pen with and start striking numbers and add numbers where you want them. So.
may very well wake up tomorrow morning with a whole different thought on this, but
Yeah,
I
I
think-
think it's a starting point.
I think
Yeah.
for where we're, I think.
Well, my hope was that
30,000.
you maybe will take this, take it home for the month and just take some time to read through it, and, and then at the meeting next month, come back and, maybe have some more ideas. And I think, at least for me, I know things need to sit and percolate a little bit. I'm not always making decisions off the cuff, so.
Do we have a graph available where we can have, I'm not a drain field expert, but generally there's a guide given for square foot versus how large that needs to be.
Yep.
I don't know. I mean, I've never designed a septic system, but I know that exists where you're doing gallons per day. So
Yeah, number of bedrooms will guide that, so like if you're looking at a mound system for a 3-bedroom house, you've got a 40-foot wide rock bed by 10 feet. and
Yeah.
You've got a boundary outside of that, your absorption area, probably a 10-foot buffer. So by the time you're looking probably 60 feet by 30 to 40 feet on like for a 3-bedroom mound, 3 to 4-bedroom mound. I guess you should get some in-ground systems up here too, though. You don't have a lot of high water table. You got good sand up here, I would think too, don't you?
Generally speaking, I think it's pretty forgiving
Yeah,
with
that's
sand.
what I think so too.
So,
Yep.
but we look at some of the homes that we just walked today.
that's what I thought.
How many
I'm like, "Ooh."
bedrooms are they gonna have?
And that's hard staff has to make those determinations, and that's a challenge. The bigger the house, that capacity of water goes up quickly. And it can eat up a lot of space. And then you don't want to touch it, you want to drive over it, it's not a parking lot, you really got to protect those, because there's technically supposed to be 2 spots.
Yeah.
On a property for a septic system in case one fails. The second, are there any questions about lot size? You guys have any other thoughts about that? The second piece is I just took this right out of the ordinance now. It's just talking about the setbacks that you currently have in the ordinance. And so I don't have any specific recommendations now. Couple that I think might be something to think about would be there's a provision in the ordinance that says a wetland adjacent connected to Lake OHW. So the way that's been interpreted, my understanding is that you've got a lake, and this is the OHW here. But if there's a wetland fringe over here, that's where you pull the setback from. And it's an option. I mean, you could do that, but I don't recommend it. I think you would be to be fair and to meet the intent of the rule, I would recommend that we would eliminate that provision and say setbacks to a body of water from the ordinary high water mark set by the DNR. It's not from that wetland fringe, because you can get a lot of wetland fringes that are above the OHW are not considered, because if it's above the OHW and it's landward, it's not lake. It's wetland fringe at that point. It's not a lake. So my recommendation would be that we would pull the setback from the lake itself, not from the wetland fringe. That was the request that came from our contractor meeting was it last December we had? That was one of the requests that they didn't think that was,
What was his reasoning?
because of they wanted to be a standard. Because if you're dealing with wetland fringe, You could have a wetland that goes way up with a parcel and then it's OHW is a set number. You always, that number will never change. That location on the lake will never change. Wetland fringes could change depending on if you get high water and, all of a sudden, you get high water, also, well, this just turned this area that was not wet into a wet area. And it could make a parcel that was compliant and not compliant. Wetlands they can move depending on hydrology and all that sort of thing. If you build it 75 feet and you went to the OHW that was set, you'll never have to worry about being compliant or not compliant again. Because that OHW will never, the wetland fringe, it could.
For example, the property that we were at this afternoon, that setback is from the wetland fringe. And best practice is that a wetland delineation is good for about 5 years because wetlands change.
That's when they expire after 5 years.
Mhm. And so you could do something one day that's compliant and 10 years later, your property could be non-compliant.
And the ordinance wouldn't come up with a big verbiage, it would just say setbacks are from the OHW. That's all it'd say. But we can always keep what you want, so just let me know. I'm happy to propose, and it's your job to dispose of any ideas that you don't like.
That one I would think I'd like to think about a little bit more.
Well, we can have that discussion next month.
Yeah.
I'm only today, just wanted to get the conversation started, so, next month, I think you'll have a little bit more, just being, ready to, be better prepared even to have discussions. The
Did you want
next
me to
page.
pass out the worksheet? as
Yeah,
well?
why don't you do that? That'd be great. I forgot about that. I did provide a worksheet for you, so you can make some notes on here. So, well, maybe if you take during the month or even tonight, just make some notes so that it gives you somewhere to write down and bring back some of that stuff to the next meeting. So, yeah, that I forgot to mention.
Homework.
Yeah, schoolwork. Yeah,
Homework.
I'm a taskmaster, so. If we go to the next page, what you'll see there are setbacks from the lake or a river stream to the septic system. And so a general development lake setbacks to a structure are 75 feet. The rule, the Minnesota Rule 6120, and with this current ordinance says, well, your septic only has to be 50 feet away from the lake. I think that if we're going to say a house has to be 75 feet away from the lake, I can't imagine putting the septic system closer would be a good idea. And that's something that came out of the shoreline rules. The updated version was to bump back that setback for a septic system to meet the building setback. So just something to think about, how you guys want to handle that. The next question I had for you is structure height. So right now, your current ordinance allows 25 feet in the shoreline area. The state rule is 6120 right now is at 25. The alt standards go to 30. Most places have gone to 35, and the DNR will provide approval of flexibility for that, just because of things have changed and people are looking to just go with higher buildings and house height. So it's up to you guys if you want to keep 25 or if you want to bump her up to the next, bump it a little bit higher. I wouldn't go much more than 35. I don't think you get that approval from the DNR, but I think you get 35 feet if you ask for it.
That one has come up quite a bit.
We'll be very clear in the definition of how we're going to determine height of building. And so that'll be very clear. We just need to know what that number is. And I can make sure that won't be, well, it'll always be disputed. People love to try to figure out how to finagle a higher building and stuff, but I don't know if just a thought, you don't have to decide tonight, but and then another question is just when you're dealing with impervious coverage, the current ordinance now for the shoreline area requires 25% in the GD and the RD lakes, and for natural environment is 20%. The shoreline rules are 25%. You can have coverage that it doesn't matter the lake class, you can have 25%. The alternative standards say 15% is what they think the impervious coverage should be limited to. And it's your call to make. 15, one. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it came across as 50 and I thought.
Yeah, well,
"Ooh,
that would be
ooh,
interesting, wouldn't
ooh."
it? That might be different. 1.5,
That woke me up here.
15%. My recommendation is to stay with the 25%, and I'll explain that as we go through the stormwater requirements a little bit later, as we go through this, to kind of explain why I think 25% still makes sense, I think.
Can we back up one step there?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Back up to structure height, we're
Yep.
above that. You know, the frontage on public goes 33, that's fine, but building height's 25 all the way across the board for all of the classifications, and we've talked with it. I think we started talking with it prior to Bethany coming up, but we're talking about raising it to 30 feet, and I think that was a recommendation from Woodside too, to just go to 30 and just,
Is that in the commercial area?
yeah.
Yeah.
But these are all 25s all the way across here, so I think we should nail that down at some point too before you,
So do you want,
The church for the bank.
yeah, that came up at the bank.
Yeah.
So,
so do you want 30 feet for your residential too, or do you want to keep that at 25?
you know,
Or you just want to change it to 30 across the board?
we haven't talked about this in quite a while because it did come up because they,
Well, it's a
No.
discussion point we can have next month. You know, I'll kind of leave that blank and
Because they-
fill it in. If you guys have a little time to think about it, maybe talk to a few folks in the area, see what they think, what would make sense.
No,
To make that change.
personally, it doesn't make a whole lot of difference to me whether it's 25 or 30, but I know we had a problem before and rather get into a match with somebody over it, you know, because they built the bank. You know, they didn't care about the 25, they did what they wanted to.
Right, and then they come back and ask. for
And so you end
approval.
up with egg on your face, so it's, the recommendation was to just go to 30 and be done with it on commercials.
I think that makes sense.
Same thing kind of happened at the church, at the Timberwood Church. That ended up as kind of a average between the front and the back.
Right,
And so,
The big thing that comes to my mind is density. When you go from commercial to residential and you increase that height, then you're enabling potentially some more density in terms of people, and
Yeah.
that leads to bedrooms and septic and all those things again, so.
And I don't disagree with that. It's just that at some point though,
Right,
we're gonna have commercial designations, and if we're gonna do 30, I mean, we should
and you know,
be doing
and
it, that's all.
to that point, Dave, I think that's a very valid point. And I think, staff have every right to ask for a floor plan for when you come in for a new house. Show me the floor plan. I want to show me the bedrooms, show me what you.
We get that right now.
Yeah,
Yep,
so I
that's
mean,
fine.
Yeah,
that should
once
be.
we looked
you should
at
always
today,
add
we're
one to
all
it. So
25
if
or under.
They got a 4-bedroom house, it should be a 5-bedroom house because
Yeah.
that just, everybody's always, once it's built, they're always gonna have. So
Okay.
that's. the way-
I was just thinking back to the church and to the bank and.
Yep.
And that's liable to come up again at some point, so,
No, that's a good point. Now we're getting more into a little bit more serious stuff, a little more for the more performance-based items. And so these are standards that we developed when I was with the county. And so the county decided at that time to break up the shoreline area, the 100,000 feet, into 2 zones. You have a protection zone and you had a buffer zone. And so if you were in the first 500 feet, you were in the protection zone. If you're in the second 500 feet, you were in the buffer zone, and there are different requirements depending on how close you were to the lake. I thought that it kind of made sense. And so if you were in that shoreline area with that 500 feet, that shoreline protection area, and depending on your impervious coverage, you had to do stormwater plans, you had to do shoreline vegetative buffer restoration work. Make sure you had erosion and sediment control in place when you're out doing the construction work. And all those types of items. And so I think it really makes sense to continue that. I'm gonna modify this a little bit to get it a little bit more clear. Bethany said that she didn't think having a footing placement inspection made sense. And so I think we'll eliminate that part on number 2. But, so this is where we're gonna start laying out, some of the standards that we're gonna require for people to do, get permits within the city. Because I was just listening to the meeting tonight, and you had 2 conditional use permits for 2 structures that were over 8,000 square feet. I assume it was just because of size. Is that
One
right?
was 6,000, the other was 8,000.
Yeah, but was it just size required?
Yep, yep.
So question for you is, do you find value in Do you find value in a conditional use permit for a big house? I mean, do you think that's an important thing for the city to require when somebody wants to come in and build? Because the way that I'm setting this up is that those same people could come in and apply for a permit. And they would be, Bethany could issue that permit, provided they met all the performance standards, and the performance standards I heard from you guys tonight were impervious coverage, stormwater management, shoreline buffer requirements. That would then take that off of you, and then it would go to staff to be able to do that administratively. And it also wouldn't, to be honest, when an applicant comes in and wants to get a variance or conditional use, it's usually gonna push about 30 to 60 days by the time they apply and go through the process and all that stuff. It helps streamline the process, and I think you would find contractors who would like to know that they could get a permit for that without having to go through a conditional use. So, because what I found in all those situations is there's never usually anything that you couldn't put in the ordinance that staff could administratively handle that would be handled at a conditional use permit. Just something to think about, something to noodle on if that's what we want to continue.
Yeah, well, I think if he was here, he probably would talk about that. Our neighbor, so we had a deal where there's a house next to us. And it's 10,000 square feet, and it doesn't look like a house.
Okay.
It looks like a shed.
Yeah.
But it's being used as half living quarters, and I don't know, if you're going into Baxter and you go into some of these residential streets, you're not gonna see a house being allowed.
Right.
So I think that was part of the reason why he liked that. But I can talk to him about it, I mean.
So then the question comes by is it a square foot issue or is it a design issue? Because you can put things in the ordinance that say, if you're going to build a house in Nisswa, it has to meet these minimum standards. And you could put things in place that don't allow that to happen.
We did put some things in place after that, I wasn't here, but they put provisions in that require any structure that has attached storage, it can't exceed 150% of the livable area.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
I think there's
that's
some
in
things we could do to
place.
offset that maybe.
Yeah.
And maybe you do say anything over 8,000 square feet, we want a conditional use permit. I don't think it's unreasonable. I don't, but that's one of the challenges is, what's it gonna look like when it's done? Right? I mean, some houses, usually when they're done, they look magnificent. And they're
Right.
just a wonderful house. And then sometimes you get a fluorescent pink house, with polka dots on the side. And, some things you can control, some things that are more of a challenge.
And the issue was we would get into the details and like, oh, do stucco and all this other stuff. I'm like, well, who cares? I mean, it's not my place to say what kind of house siding you should have,
That is the interesting part of how much do you guys get involved in the design process of somebody's house?
Yeah.
That's always, I think that's a challenge. So, I mean, you could, I've seen provision ordinance, keep the up north look and paint should be, earth-based tones. It's like, great, what is, I don't even know what that means, right? And so a lot of that you find in declarations and all that, or, covenants for a place. And, but you can have things in place that say the color of the house, it's got to be the same color as any other, it's got to match, all the buildings got to match the same color. You can have, a minimum width, it's got to be at least, 30 feet wide to build a house in this way. You can't go.
22.
Yeah,
It's
so
22.
you guys see, so there are provisions that you can put in place that will make sure the development is the way you want it, but.
If I might add to that, one things I really like is if there was a provision that required screening, and screening can be use of color. And that's a really nice thing that then you can, dictate what color. You have to screen it from, if a water oriented accessory structure needs to be screened, either vegetation or by color. In other words, you can't paint it silver and have it super reflective, right? Because that's going to stand out on the shoreline. So that's an effective way of being able to deal with that too.
Yep, I agree. So I think there's some provisions we can go in there to tweak and modify that might satisfy that issue. And you might say we still want a conditional use permit, and that's fine. Well, that's not a problem at all. The next page, it just talks about vegetation management, and this comes out of the more of the alt standards for vegetation. It's much more clear in here versus what the old 6120 was about what clearing is allowed and where limited clearing is allowed and what vegetation needs to be maintained and removal of trees that are dead, disease, dying. I think this part really is very clear. And I think it'll be very helpful for Bethany, when she's trying to, go out to a piece of property and enforce the ordinance, that, have very clear standards as to what those are. If you look at the next part on decks, 6120 does allow decks to be added onto without a variance that don't meet setbacks, provided that they were built prior to their being zoning. There's no other spot that would meet setbacks on the property with the structure. And what you're basically allowed to do is to encroach 15% closer to the lake with no closer than 30 square feet and, oh, it got cut off, and 250 square feet is the max. It just allows some minor deck modifications to a property without having to be run through the variance process. So
Yeah. Can we back up the
Yeah.
vegetation management again?
Yep.
We're skirting tree ordinance in here, where we're dictating, you can only remove 20% of trees or 25% or something like that. Right
Right.
now, if I'm correct, we do not have a tree ordinance. So I mean, somebody can, unless we make it a condition of an approval, that they're gonna leave some trees, but
With the Nisswa ordinance, I think all vegetation removal is, don't call me, but it's all subject to planning commission approval. For
right.
vegetation
I mean, we can
removal
make
or
conditions
permits.
with somebody, but we don't have any hard and set rules that you can only cut a certain percentage of trees off of any property to develop it. If it's, if it's residential, if it's commercial, it's a different number, of course, But we don't have that right now. I mean, it's where we have specific guideline numbers, right?
Right, we don't.
Okay,
Mm-mm.
so
Let me get that up.
And a point to bring up about this vegetation management too, is that the DNR actually has been doing a little bit of research on this, and they're finding that we're losing statewide about 1% of our shoreline vegetation on a yearly basis. And so I think a lot of that is happening just because there aren't clear standards for how we want the vegetation on that shoreline area managed. And so I think this will be very clear as to what the expectations are, and people can then look at that and be able to make decisions. And you can require anybody who wants to do vegetation management, get a shoreline alteration permit from Bethany.
yeah,
That
I'm
would
not,
require a permit.
I don't really want to go there.
Yeah, right.
You
I
know,
Yep,
I, like I said, I come from the Twin Cities area
yep,
where
I agree.
for decades, we controlled every tree.
Right, Yep.
If somebody wanted to come in and develop their property, we had a control over that tree. If you took more, if you exceeded the minimum, then you'd put back at the rate of 2.5,
yeah,
in per caliper inches per inch. Well, it gets to be a lot of trees after a while.
Yep.
It gets to the point where there's not enough place to plant them.
right, absolutely.
And so then you say, well, if you can't plant them on your own property, then you plant them in a city park,
Right.
so nobody ever got off the hook, but I don't really want to see us go there.
I
up
don't think
here.
we need to. I really don't think we need to.
Okay, I'm just,
Yeah,
I ju-
we'll make sure we get this all
That's
detailed
fine.
properly
That's-
so that we're not,
that's
because I
fine.
don't think that accomplishes it.
Okay.
I really don't.
I'm much more practical than that these days,
Yeah.
so.
And I'm not a fan of getting permits for everything either. I think landowners should be able to make decisions on their property and not have to get a permit
Okay.
for every last thing. You have to
Okay.
do, so. So that, the ultimate goal of this ordinance is to streamline it for the landowners and contractors to know what they got to do and just follow the requirements to get a permit. Right now, you don't really have a standard for patios, and what does that look like? What I'm recommending here is that, within, so you've got the, shore impact zone 1, shore impact zone 2, is that, you could have a 250 square foot patio. You could allow that in shore impact zone 1, which is the closer to the lake, or 400 square feet if you have an approved stormwater management plan. But that would be your water oriented accessory structure. So if you put a patio and you want it to be 20 feet from the lake, you could, but you don't get to build a water oriented accessory structure in addition to that. So you get one of those accessory type uses down by the water. Any patio that's built behind the structure setback. So if a patio is at 80 feet on a GD lake, they don't have to get a permit for that. They would be able to build that because that's meeting the structure setbacks, provided they didn't go over their impervious coverage on the lot. you know, the county, when we first started, had those at 120 square feet. And if you put that out, you know, and you lay it out and then you try to put a fire pit in the middle and put chairs around it,
Can't do it.
it's not big enough. It really wasn't feasible to use, just wasn't big enough. That was one of the requests that we had, was to get to that higher number so that it could be used. And you could require any patio that gets built has to do stormwater plan. Any patio could require that. Especially if it's like in shore impact zone 1.
Would fire pits be, you talked about fire pits. But that would be included in a patio section of this ordinance,
That's a big question that people always like to,
because then the question comes out. You can put in a fire pit, it can only be limited to 36 inches normally,
that's
for the-
exactly, that's what I.
And
that
it
would
has
be-
to be a minimum of so many feet from a combustible, from the structure.
Yep. Yep.
Sometimes it's 50, sometimes it's 75.
Yeah.
Sometimes
agree.
it's,
Yeah, you want a fire pit, I agree. with that.
sometimes it's 10 feet away, which is just asking for trouble, but
That's the problem, yeah.
But I was just wondering that's where that would come in.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, that the question comes up, so Bethany goes out and a guy's got a 38 heading back for a variance. You know, so it's always that push and pull of that kind of thing too, so you have to put a number on it, because otherwise somebody could put a fire pit that's 8 feet long and build this gigantic patio around it and stuff, and it would just be not what the intent of the ordinance was trying to accomplish, so you do have to have those limits. And we can talk numbers too, specifically, as we go forward, next month too. The next one, I think it will be helpful, stairways, walkways, lifts, landings. So basically what this clarifies is what the sizes are allowed for stairways and walkways. So your stairways are gonna be allowed a maximum of 4 feet in width on a residential lot, up to 8 feet on a commercial lot. For a landing, so sometimes you build a stair, you don't wanna build, if it's a big bluff, you don't wanna go all the way down at one shot, so you try to break it up, so you could put landings in there. For a residential, 32 square feet, commercial will be 64. And then, in those areas where somebody wants to have a lift, they're gonna be put in the same area. So if you got steps going down, your lift is right next to it. You don't have a stairway here and then a lift 20 feet over on the other side. You want them to be in that same corridor for that lift. And then we got just some requirements about what can be done in the bluff impact zone, and basically saying that the only vegetation to be removed within the bluff impact zone would be that which would be needed to put the steps and the lift down to the lake. Those standards, I think, are very important to have, and to be clear so that staff know how big of an access path people are gonna have, or stairways. The other side of that page has guest cottage and guest quarter standards. One thing that I was noticing, and I had a conversation with Bethany, is that right now I believe the guest cottage or guest quarter standards allow a 900 square foot building. The shoreline rules allow 700. So we're gonna have to reduce that down to 700 square feet, or with a really, really good reasons for flexibility with the DNR. And I don't think we'll have a very good reason, because to have guest cottage or guest quarter standards by the rule, you have to have duplex lot size. So if you want to build a, by the rule, build a shoreline or build a guest cottage on a GD lake, you have to have 200 feet wide. And you have to have double the lot area. So instead of 20,000, you have to have 40,000. That's what the rule says. DNR will give out rule flexibility on this. If you have standards in place that require stormwater, vegetative buffer requirements, those sort of activities. So they are willing to trade off on some of these standards to get some of these performance BMPs in place to offset what they think could be negative impacts to the water.
What is this guest quarter, guest cottage?
So a guest cottage is an individual building, standalone building, 700 square feet, 12 or 15 feet of maximum height. Guest quarters is basically over top of the garage. You
Okay.
have quarters over top. garage. You get one or the other, you don't get both, and both still 700 square feet of living area.
So there's a case where that, gee, we've just superseded our 25 feet in height that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So I mean, that's,
Now you got residential structure that's 30 feet.
you're right.
you know,
So that's just was thrown in there as an example. So, yeah,
Okay,
that's not something that's.
we
that's
just
not
have to
something
avoid
that's set.
conflict.
Yeah, we'll figure that out.
And
We'll figure that out. And then the next page talks about water-oriented accessory structures. And this is where you can actually have a little shed down by the water's edge. Maximum size is 120 square feet. Maximum height is 12 feet, 20-foot setback. And then you know, it has to meet all the ordinance provisions as far as impervious, stormwater, and all those items. And you can't be used for human habitation or have a bathroom in it. It's basically meant for storage down by the water. The thing about this that I think is important is that A, the rules allow it. And B, it gets done. It happens anyway. And so there's a lot of enforcement activities when you don't allow these. And so it makes sense to allow a smaller structure down by the water, provided you put some BMPs in place that will make sure that it's screened properly, that there's shoreline vegetation, that there's stormwater management, you know, all those types of issues. Let's see here.
I have a couple of questions. on
Yep,
that
yep.
one. Does a fish house meet this standard?
We will clarify it. The answer to that is how is it being used? So if they're using it as a storage structure, then that would count as your water rented accessory structure.
Okay.
Yep. And so that's how people used to get around the rule was, you know, they would just build a boathouse and stick it down by the lake and it would never leave the lot, you know, it would never go out, you know, I guess it would never come back. And so we just basically said you can have 120 square foot down by the lake. And if you choose to pull your boathouse off and you want to use that to store your floaties and fishing rods in the summer,
How about a sauna?
120 square.
I think if it's
Yeah.
gonna have any sort of a water, any water use in it, no, I don't know, that'd be interesting. Cause you're just heating water at that point. It's not like you have plumbing in there. But it wouldn't be used for human habitation. I would see why not.
we're splitting hairs here, but what about a pump house? You know, like you're pumping water out of the lake
Yeah.
for your irrigation system and you want an enclosure to it.
A little
to it.
doghouse size that
Yeah,
goes over your.
Yeah, something that opens up though. It's got a door and you're got everything enclosed in
Yeah,
there.
I
Would
think,
that be included in this
well,
section?
my recommendation would be to exempt size. That would say you don't need a permit if you're building a pump house that's.
Yeah.
Certain square foot, and we could decide if that's
And
a
of a
4x4 at a certain height.
certain maximum height, 6 feet or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think there should be a
I
provision.
think we
that
should do
allows
that because that does happen on a lot of
does.
shoreline
Yep.
places
It does.
and
And you
Yeah.
don't want to put people in non-compliance
Yeah.
for reasons that really aren't beneficial, so.
Yeah.
The shoreline rules do allow actual boathouses to be built. They still allow a boathouse. I think having a water-oriented accessory structure would be fine. I wouldn't recommend allowing boathouses to
Okay.
continue to be built. As new, you got your existing ones throughout town that people can rebuild and they can do that according to the statute and the non-conformity section. But I think the water to accessory structures are, I think, a very good compromise compared to allowing boathouses again on the shoreline. I think the rule only allows, I believe it's 250 square feet. And it's gotta be 20 feet away from the water's edge, so, you know, I think using the water and accessory structure, I think is kind of a meet in the middle situation. I don't think most people expect that they can build a boathouse anymore anyway. But within the realm of possibilities, it's always an option. If we jump into accessory structures, a couple of questions I have for you. Your current ordinance requires conditional use permits based on size. Do you want to continue that? Continue doing certain CUPs for certain size accessory structures? This provision here would allow accessory structures to be built, provided they met setback, impervious coverage. And you can always limit building size if you want. You can say if, you know, if your lot is this big, you get to build this big of a building. If it's this big, you can build this big of a building. So you can't, you know, have a 15,000 square foot lot and build a 10,000 square foot, you know, shed on it. Just something to think about if you want that to be a CUP. The other question is about swims. Do you permit Bethany swimming pools right now? If they want a swimming pool?
As they are listed as an accessory structure or an accessory use in the definitions of our ordinance.
So I would assume that we would want to continue permitting pools, right? So the question is, right now, I think the ordinance talks about either in-ground or above ground are permitted, I believe.
I don't think it even specifies that. It just says that it is an accessory use and as an accessory structure, and by default, structures require permits, and that's why we've been permitting.
So, you know, the question is, do you want to permit somebody that puts an in-ground pool in that, you know, permanent block, you know, set up with filters versus somebody who goes down to Menards, and picks up a $300 pool for the summer for their kids to swim in with, you know, more of a temporary use of the structure. Do you want that to be permitted too? Or should they get a permit for both? Can't put it in shore impact zone 1. Maybe they could be back in shore impact zone 2. Just something to think about as far as how you choose and how you want to regulate pools, because I'm sure that's a pretty consistent activity, I would think, up here, that people want their pools, which I don't blame them one bit. The next section, I know this is probably getting long. We can stop. You just tell me to stop whenever you want, but retaining walls, just put some provisions in place so it gives Bethany some reasons for retaining walls as to when can they be built, when can't they be built. In essence, it's to control erosion. You don't get to build retaining walls in the setback. We're only talking about the building setback. You don't get to build a retaining wall unless you could show there's evidence of erosion happening and that this will be the only solution to solve that erosion problem. And I think the next section is the reason why I'm probably here in general, is about boardwalks and how to regulate boardwalks. And so this is my recommendation, and I think it's pretty clear. They could be placed on temporary or permanent supports. They can have railings. They shall meet property line setbacks. Article 21 is that's a different provision that will apply here. But the boardwalks must be perpendicular to the lake, so you don't get to build a parallel boardwalk. Okay. Boardwalks cannot encroach your neighbor's riparian zone. We will define riparian zone in the definition, so you don't get, this is your lot, this is your neighbor's lot, and you don't get to build a boardwalk that goes like that. You got to keep it within your riparian lots as they extend out to the lake. That side yard setback, and the key to this is that the jurisdiction of city boardwalk regulation ends at the ordinary high water mark, because that's where your jurisdiction ends. So anything beyond the OHW is a DNR permit. They'd have to work with the DNR going past the OHW.
Were you going to recommend any sizes for this? Maximum?
Yeah,
widths,
I meant
height,
to put that down. My
above
recommendation
vegetation.
is 6 feet wide,
6 feet,
6 feet wide.
12 inches above vegetation.
Yep, 12 inches. Yep. 12 inches, at least 12 inches above on water, so that they can get sunlight down to maintain vegetation. I think that will solve your boardwalk problem. And to be honest, I think the county will just probably come behind and copy it, guys, so. Private water access ramps, there are some lakes that don't have a access ramp. And so on those lakes, you would allow that with a short alteration permit being, follow it meets these requirements. You know, pretty simple stuff. You can't use no asphalt. It's only 15 feet wide. It's you have to be able to, you know, there'll be some stormwater provisions as part of that, so you don't create a channel to the lake of just water running in. So that, I think that helps that out. I think another issue that, you know, needs to be discussed is just controlled and alternative access lots. You know, controlled access lots are when you subdivide off the lake and then you have a lot on the lake and everybody in that subdivision just to have a dock out. You know, we aren't gonna, that's gonna be prohibited. We don't want off lots to have access to the lakes with a bunch of docks and boats. And then the alternative access lot is a situation where you might have a, a parcel being developed and it's very wet. It's very, got a wet front on it. But there's a part of the property that's got nice high ground. Well, alternative access says, everybody, we're gonna put one dock out there. Everybody gets to have a boat slip on that one dock instead of putting boardwalks all across all through that wetland area. These are the ag use standards I mentioned before, that 50-foot setback. We'll be including that. Shoreline recreation use area, so when you get down by the shoreline back zone, how wide of an area can people actually use to create like a sand beach, a place where they can put their dock out, that sort of a thing. We've got standards. The next part of the ordinance really just talks about standards for grading and filling and for dirt moving. And so we're gonna have requirements in place for if you have an annual ice ridge that occurred within 1 year, or if you have a historic ice ridge that's been there for multiple years, what can be done to that to allow access to the lake. We're gonna have the quantity and numbers of dirt that can be moved without getting that require a permit or require a conditional use permit. And then we're also gonna have standards for riprap. So basically riprap is gonna be very similar to same standards you have in place for retaining walls, which says there must be an established active erosion problem, with riprap being the only solution to that. The key to riprap is that any permit riprap over 200 feet is permitted by the DNR. And so the city has the authority to permit up to 190 feet wide riprap. I know that was exciting. There's a lot of stuff. I threw a lot of stuff at you. So I just wanted to get it out on the table tonight so that you guys have some time to think about it. And I hope that it'll help as we have that conversation next month when the ordinance provisions are actually put into place on paper, that you guys have had some time to think about it and you'll provide me some feedback. So this was just more of a precursor to see, just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of what I'll be coming back with next. So
I'd be more than happy to answer any questions too. So if you have a question, you can send me an email. Give me a call.
Bethany's got my phone number. If you're reviewing it, and you want to call, just give me a call. I'll chat over the phone with you a little bit about it and try to answer some questions. If there's clarity that needs to be, I'll be happy to do that.
This whole discussion tonight might have kind of broadsided Sean. What is this? And, you're familiar with the background on what's going on with this shoreline ordinance? Oh, because it's been very difficult. And a lot of interpretation. Our development ordinance has not been very easy to use over the years. And so we were charged with working up a new ordinance, basically, and that's something that can be recommended to the council for a whole new shoreline subdivision ordinance. So, and we've been working on this for about 3 months now,
Been a while, yeah.
4 months.
Yeah, 4 months, I think.
We started
Oh.
back in May.
May,
Yeah, we started back in May, so
even longer.
But I was just sitting here thinking, Sean's sitting back there and wondering, what's
Every
all this
meeting like
about?
this.
let's hope. not. If they're like this, I'm sorry. You guys have any thoughts for me? Like I said, call me if you have any questions. Shoot me an email. She's got my email. I'll be happy to. I prefer to answer them before the meeting than during the meeting. To give me a heads up so I can be prepared and give you guys a bit of information.
Our plan is to get through this whole thing by spring, correct?
Mhm. Yep.
March or April, and then
I hope to
Yep.
have. I hope to
after
have
that, life should be easier for all of us.
the latest you'll get a draft be February. I'm hoping-
Okay,
I'm
great.
hoping January would be when I
Yeah.
give you a final draft. Well, I have
Coming along good.
taken too much of your time anyway, so thanks for listening and participating. I really do appreciate it, and we'll just keep moving forward.
I think we all
Thanks,
appreciate
Chris.
everything you're doing.
And Dave, if you have any thoughts, feel free to let me know.
Thank you, Chris.
And I
Moving on to the fee schedule review.
Yeah, there's more. So I hope you have had a chance to take a look at the information that I supplied. This is after the summer. This is through land use permit, I believe 105. There's a quick summary here. Thank you. So we had talked about changing our fee schedule to not be based on valuation, which is a subjective figure that we've just been getting. And then perhaps using a more structured square foot process as far as fee schedule. So what I did over the course of the summer is I just put all the information every time we had a permit. I would figure out what it would cost using the Crow Wing County's per square footage fee schedule. I just figured that was an easy way. If you look at the commission, planning commission memo, our valuation fee schedule gave an amount of $37,600 that we took in for those permit fees. The difference would have been 3,700 had we used the square foot. So it's not a lot difference. What are your thoughts on it? Do you have any questions?
What are we basing the square foot fee figure at?
On the Crow Wing County. So it's, it's based on, I can pull it up if you'd like. Just certain thresholds, so up to 200 square feet is $50, up to, 200 to this is that. And there's different amounts for new residential versus accessory structure. Okay. So right here, new construction residential up to 1,000 is 250, 1,000 to 2,000 is 500, 2,000 to 3,000, 750, 3,000 to 4,000 is 1,000. Each additional 1,000 over that is 250. And then new construction for commercial, there's different thresholds. And then the accessory structures, less than 100 is a $25 permit, 100 to 200 is $100, and it goes up from there.
What is the, what are the, did you, I'm assuming you did, but what were the comps to like Cross Lake, Baxter?
Cross Lake has the same as Crow Wing. That's why I picked just Crow Wing, because Cross Lake has the same. Lake Shore had, I did include that. So Lake Shore had just a minimum of $600. And then commercial is a square footage fee with a minimum fee of $750. So they just had a base rate. You wanted to build a house, it was $600.
Okay.
So we can do square footage. We can keep the valuation. We could do a base rate, but just wanted to see the direction that you wanted to go with this.
The valuation that's shown in this table, 0 to 5 and 5 to 50, and et cetera, that number is coming from the party that's applying for the permit. I assume.
Yeah, they just tell
I
me.
mean, it's
and-
not a calculated. I think my problem in the past, recent past, has been that somebody comes in and they're building a 1,400 square foot house. And, it's valued at $250,000. Then somebody comes in and they're building an 8,000 square foot house and the permit value was 350,000. That's the part that was sticking in,
Right.
on me before.
Yeah,
And we gotta find a way to,
level the
Make those-
playing field.
Level the playing field is a good term for it.
Yeah,
you know.
I think it's fair to charge people based on a square footage amount versus evaluation. And what I found out is that it really doesn't, I mean, it came out pretty equal. But this one isn't subjective,
Yeah.
and that I like.
You can use, square footage, but there's numbers available through National Home Builders Association and insurance companies and, there's numbers you can come up with and,
Yep.
they've risen substantially, they're
Yes. they
gone
are.
from $125 a foot to $250 almost overnight,
Mhm.
and
You're just going based off square footage.
Yep. Well,
Yeah.
and it's.
yeah,
can
I think
prove
we
it,
just
you
need
know,
to
I think it's quantifiable.
eliminate this. Well, what's the value? Oh, well, it's 100,000. Okay, and that's what the permit's based on, and that's not fair, so.
Yeah, and I have no way to check that in an effective way.
No, but square footage you do based
Sure.
on what it's, the average cost of building a house.
I get the plans, I go out there, I do the site visit, I measure, I see what it is, so I know that it is within those thresholds. So, and what we want those thresholds to be, we can decide that. It can be
Right.
the same, it could be different. So I'm open to whatever you want me to pursue as far as presenting something to you at the next planning commission meeting. Also, a couple of the other things I took a look at were the septic permits, our fee schedule. We think we're pretty low versus other municipalities as far as septic permits. I think we could charge more for those. I did just a quick comparison with the few shoreline alteration permits that I did. Of course, they're land use permits. It's staggering how few I do. You would think with all the work that people do within that shoreland impact zone, I would have a lot of permits, but I don't. And so that's that will change once we have those shoreline alteration permits.
Mhm.
Additional use and interim use variance permits, we charge $250 for residential applications, $300 for commercial applications. I did print off, or I did include in your packet, the initial information I gave you at the beginning of the summer. Just the comparison of all the different, yes.
In this spreadsheet, this one, this spreadsheet, you have a septic fee of residentials, you have it listed at 150 when it should be 250. So maybe the calculation isn't as different as we see.
I'm sorry, what part?
Okay, so this septic fee,
Mhm.
you have 150 across all the board, we charge 250. So. if
On the
the-
septic?
Yep, on residential. You wrote
We charge
150.
150, 300 for commercial. Oh,
So
I typoed on that, sorry. On the planning commission memo, that is incorrect. Nisswa charges 150 for residential applications. Or what do you? That's the conditional use and interim use permit. Right there.
Oh, okay,
And then
I'm sorry.
septic is right here.
I was just reading, I'm sorry.
Okay, strike all that,
Strike all that.
reverse that.
I'm not putting that in.
Well, I'd just like us to see to develop a schedule that's somewhat simple,
Mhm.
but equitable,
Yes,
and I just don't think that some people people take advantage of every system and, it's,
absolutely.
and
So I personally would like to move to a square footage based for land use permit fee schedule. Taking in, I'd like to just take a look at area and see if those thresholds, but I can use as a blueprint. I can use the counties, I can use Cross Lakes, I can use any of those. I printed all that off for you at the beginning. I didn't want to print all that off again today. But I did just put the up here. See if I can get it. Problem is you can't see it. This is the comparison right here of all the different areas. So the question is, do we want to charge more for septic permits? Do we want to charge more for conditional use, interim use, and variances? Plats, lot splits, boundary line adjustments. Boundary line adjustments, I would like to increase that. Right now, we charge $50 for these applications. I've been discussing with Chad Connor of Widseth, who usually I send boundary line adjustments to, and I know that they charge us more than we are collecting for doing that. So right now, we're not even recouping the cost that it costs us to do a boundary line adjustment. So that needs to be changed. He hasn't gotten back to me quite yet on the dollar amount that we're charged for that.
I don't know that we're in a position to set those numbers for you. I think you're in a position to do that because you know what our costs are. And
Yep.
you know what the costs are for a consultant if you need to ask a question and get something approved and I don't know that any of us are in a position to dictate those numbers.
Yep, and so the purpose of tonight's discussion is just to see where you want me to head with this. If you want me to look into those to see if we need to raise the rates on those specific items that I listed.
I don't know. What do you think?
Well, and I think on all of these other permits like you're talking about and, you know, all anything other than a building permit. I think the house building permit said, I think we should use the square footage basis.
Okay.
And the basis for that cost, you know, can come from a number of different sources.
Okay.
So,
All right, I will work on that. Another item, driveways. Currently, our fee schedule does not include a driveway fee, and our fee computation calculator does not give a suggested valuation for these projects. Our ordinance requires driveway permits. So do we want to require driveway permits as required by our ordinance? And if so, do we need to define the performance standards and what is required for a complete driveway permit application and what actually goes into the permitting process? And then if we don't want to do a driveway permit, we need to amend the ordinance to reflect that. Same with demolition permits. It also requires that we give permits for demolitions, but then it gives no information. There's no fee on our fee schedule.
I just want to pipe up. At one point in time, we did charge $50 for demo permits and that was removed and I don't recall the reasoning for that.
And if it's removed, that's fine. Absolutely fine. We can even require a permit and have no fee, but we need to state that. Or it needs to be pulled from the ordinance that we don't require a permit with a demolition.
by driveway, are you talking just a roughed in dirt driveway, rock? Are you talking a paved driveway?
There's no specification. So that's what, we have no standards. We have nothing, what does it look like to give a driveway
As
permit?
we develop standards, I don't know why we should have a permit.
Yeah, and then do we have to have these standards defined when they're putting in a construction access?
That's up to the engineer.
I think,
David.
in my opinion, construction accesses are temporary. That goes along with erosion control plans and things like that, that we get to review. And if it's a permanent driveway, then, it gets a little more important when you get commercial entrances being placed and where they're being located. Especially on city, county, state highways. So all permitted by different agencies, but the city has a role in that with making sure that public health, safety and welfare is being.
But that would be part of the building permit
Yeah, wouldn't that
process,
be,
wouldn't it? I mean, you're gonna see where a driveway is gonna go in
And impervious calculations along with it.
Yep.
you
And
know.
that all can be done, but we just need to have standards. What's the width for emergency vehicles? You know, does it need a culvert? All of those considerations.
I've seen this go from one extreme to the other, actually having, you know, no real standard other than the baseline ordinance. To having, you know, a drawn
Yeah, we don't.
standard with specified width, specified height clear zone, you know, cleared width minimum. I've seen it go to that extent, so I don't know if you want to go there.
This is Nisswa.
Sure.
I don't think we want to do anything like that. I certainly wouldn't, but.
But there's something to be said about, you know, the public works director being able to go out and look at it and determine if a culvert is needed.
Yeah. Well, even with the driveway, I mean, what's the standard width for a driveway? I mean,
12 feet.
33 feet, 15 feet. I could see, I'm just talking about people that will look at it and then go around the rules to do something ridiculous.
The minimum frontage is 33 feet for access
Mhm.
to a legal lot. Within that, you still have to meet setbacks from the property line, which is
5 feet.
5 feet, so that takes it down to 23 feet. That kind of in that scenario.
Mhm.
I would say the average driveway is probably 10 to 14 feet in width.
Too many cans of worms.
I know.
Kill me driveway.
This is what I spend my days thinking
Yeah.
about.
I think you're-
Well, what kind of recommendation are you looking for then?
I would like to see that driveways for new construction need to meet certain standards. And, but not who determines these and who goes out and does the site visit, those kinds of things. And I'm not knowledgeable enough about road construction to know what would work.
What's the minimum width that's required to get a fire truck, emergency vehicles into a construction area, for instance, into a house that's being built? I mean, we're 15
I
feet.
think that's where the minimum 20-foot cleared came from and like 14 feet high so that you could get a fire truck
Yeah.
in.
I think dealing with that part of it is one thing, but,
Mhm.
you know, dictating the size of driveways for somebody, and I think that's,
Yeah.
we should be in that.
No, and I'm just more concerned about culverts and emergency services. Honestly, that's the
You
two
know,
items.
Okay. well then.
The other thing that doesn't happen a lot, but it's when someone has a steep driveway that comes down right to the edge of the city street. And it becomes a snow plowing problem when they have the wing out and they come along and they take off the end of the driveway.
Mm.
And it's really just common sense from a construction standpoint, really. I mean, to
Mhm.
maintain some grade off the
Yeah.
edge of the city street so that you're not causing a problem.
So there's a couple things that we can do. We can define the standards, which Tom and I are working on anyway, because that just needs to be done. But you could do a flat rate permit fee if a driveway is $50 and we'll take care of a site visit, we'll do that, but there's the fee. So it's just tacked on like a septic. So you've got your land use, you've got your driveway. Or we just say that driveways need to be constructed to these standards. There's no fee. You know what I mean? So we can just eliminate the fee, eliminate the permit requirement in that way. You can still have standards and not have them have to get a permit.
I'm fine with not having a permit fee, but if you have to go out there to do a consultation, there's costs involved in
Right.
that.
And $50 doesn't go very far anymore.
No.
You know, and if you're gonna have something, then you might as well make it a minimum of 100, you know, so,
Yes.
you know, so, yeah, absolutely. I mean, lunch for two is $40 these days, so.
Do you think It's something that maybe we permit it and fee it for maybe a year or two and see maybe what other standards or requirements, things that Bethany or Public Works sees throughout this process to see if it's working or not. I mean, it can be changed, but we've done a few things like that before.
No, there's a need for some of this kind of thing, you know, construction entrances, for instance, in areas where the soils are different. You know, you get down where you've got clay. You know, it gets wet and the trucks are in and out, they're hauling big globs of clay and stuff out onto the streets, you know, onto the roads, and you don't want that, but then they'd require rock pads that go in 30 feet and, you know, there's crushed rock.
Mhm.
But with the sand we've got up here, that really isn't much of a problem, so I don't, you know, we don't have to.
And I've also found most excavators, which are the ones doing this work, do that.
Yeah.
They put in the gravel. and-
Yeah. All right.
So demolition permit, demolition fee.
It's up to you.
I don't do anything with the demolition.
You just
It's
issue
good
it,
to
right?
have a record of it, but I don't think there should be a fee.
No, that's fine.
It's, and yeah, I was gonna say, especially if it's connected to city sewer, we need to ensure that things are getting capped off correctly. So I think a permit is good to have that documentation. Now, whether there's a fee for some of that, because somebody has to go and inspect, make sure that the sewer's been capped, if it's connected to city sewer. So that would just make true sense on.
Well. Nisswa, of course, has got a water, you know, water problem. Every dwelling is punctured and has got a well, you know, and so, I mean, all that stuff has to be watched by somebody. I don't know who, but I don't know, is that your,
Wells are regulated by the state of Minnesota.
I mean, if somebody's gonna come in, we're gonna. Usually if they're gonna demolish something, they're gonna build something new. Is that,
Usually that's
so
how
that
it
probably
goes.
is not a problem. I was just thinking of wellheads that are not capped.
There are times. And also, you know, crushing and abandoning the septic. There's a bunch of forms that the state requires to be completed for that as well, so. Are there any questions on any of that information?
Information overload tonight.
I know, I apologize for that. I will go ahead and I will have something at the December Planning Commission meeting for the fee schedule, as we've discussed this evening.
Yep. Next item is city planners report.
Still working to fill the Planning Commission vacancies. We have one that will be starting, Sean Weldon. We're very excited about that. 2023 Lake Association Spring Gathering, a save the date was sent out to the lake associations in our area.
These are lake association, not homeowners association. things
Correct.
like that.
Yep, this is the Lake Association. And so our idea here is to get together, have all the lake associations come together. It will be in time for the adoption of our new shoreland ordinance. I'm hoping to have fact sheets. I'm hoping to have information to get out to them. That way they can include it in their spring newsletters as well. And we can help get that information out to people as soon as possible.
Something new.
Something,
This is something new.
yes, yep. Yep, I met with all the lake associations this summer. It was a great experience. We spent a lot of time talking. All of them had a lot of the same issues on their lakes. And I think this would be a great format if we could do this, hopefully yearly, that we can discuss issues that are important and things that are impacting each of the lake associations and what we can do to help get information to property owners.
Unrelated, do the lakes in Nisswa that have associations, do they also have lid boards?
Do they have what?
Lid boards, lake improvement districts?
I don't know.
A lid board gets tax money from the tax base.
Okay,
And most of the time, I mean, our lake has it, and it's just, basically it goes to weed treatments.
okay.
And it can be anything. I mean, we're discussing our dam and everything else, but I'm just curious.
I haven't heard, and
Okay,
they didn't mention it, so. I will look into that.
Yeah, I mean, most of them do. You just have to apply at the county to get it, but then.
Okay.
Is this something that you want commission attendance at or council attendance?
Oh, yeah, you guys can come. Absolutely.
No, I'm just wondering if it was, you will be there.
Oh, well, it's a save the date. I'll have more information for you in April, so it's ways away. Any other questions?
No. Not for me.
Permits, was there a lot of permits? Or are we slowing down?
There was 11.
Oh,
Hasn't hit yet.
It's slowing down, definitely, so, yeah.
I'll entertain a motion. To adjourn.
I move to adjourn.
I'll second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, motion carries. Meeting is adjourned.